In this presentation of the history of the Middle East, we will take a closer look at the religion of Islam. When people think of the Middle East, they usually think of Islam. When people think of Islam, they usually think of the Middle East. It is possible to talk of one without the other, but an understanding of the Middle East does require some knowledge of Islam. In the previous presentation, we looked at the origins of Islam, how Muhammad started the Muslim community in Mecca. Islam didn't really start to grow until after the death of Muhammad. That's when the Muslim warriors went on jihad, holy war, and conquered most of Central Asia. After Muhammad's death, the leaders of the Ummah, or the Muslim community, had to figure out what it meant to be a Muslim. While Muhammad was alive, that was easy. You could be a good Muslim by simply doing what the Prophet said. But after their leader was gone, the people had to figure it out for themselves. They had the Quran, of course, the book of Revelation written by Muhammad, but as Islam spread into places outside Arabia, Muslims encountered new situations that the Quran did not address. The leaders of the Ummah looked to the Quran. They also looked to the Sunnah, or the traditions of the Prophet, and they also referred to the Hadith, the stories of what Muhammad had done and said. The decisions of these leaders eventually developed into a code of laws known as Sharia. Over the years, Muslim clerics further developed Sharia by qiyas, adopting precedents, previous decisions, and applying them to make decisions on new situations. They sometimes came to a consensus, or ijma, where the overwhelming majority of the Ummah came into agreement on a certain issue. Consensus was not always reached, however, and there were some issues where the leaders struggled to make the correct decision. This was known as ijtihad, which means to struggle. This word has the jihad word in it, which I'll deal with a little bit later. Sharia law is kind of an amorphous entity. If you were to ask a question on a point of Sharia from a cleric, say, in America, and ask the same question to a cleric, say, in Morocco, you might get two totally different answers. Sharia law, for all its complexities and ambiguities, simply tells Muslims how they are to act. Sharia informs the faithful on what it means to be a good Muslim. Some critics of Sharia will pull out the most controversial aspects, such as the area of honor killing, where parents are obligated to put their children to death if their children bring dishonor to the family or to the Muslim community. It has happened in recent times where a father ritually executes his daughter for simply flirting with a boy. But Sharia deals mostly with mundane, everyday activities. It actually reaches into every aspect of daily human life. When a community of Muslims becomes predominant within a neighborhood, the people will sometimes follow Sharia and ignore the established law of that land. One of the reasons for the success of Islam, with over 1 billion followers, moving quickly towards 2 billion, is that the religion can adapt to people in any situation. The complexities of Sharia engages the most brilliant thinkers, but Islam is also simple enough for any illiterate peasant to follow. To be a good Muslim, one simply needs to follow the rituals outlined by the 5 pillars of faith. The ritual for becoming a Muslim is known as Shahada, and it's a simple one. One simply needs to say, "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger." Of course, it must be said in Arabic and preceded by the statement of faith, and of course, it must be said in the presence of witnesses. Then there are the daily prayers, known as Salat. Devout Muslims face Mecca 5 times during the day to perform the prescribed prayers done mostly at home or in the workplace. Zakat is the ritual of giving to the poor. It has developed over the years where Muslims give 2.5% of their income in assets. In some places where Sharia is dominant, zakat is automatically deducted from people's paychecks. Then there is Psalm, or fasting, during the month of Ramadan, which is the month when Muhammad received the first revelations. During this month, devout Muslims abstain from food during the daylight hours, and at sundown, they usually have a kind of party where people go out to the streets and buy stuff to eat. The interesting thing about this month is that Islam follows a lunar calendar, which is shorter than the solar calendar. Each year, the month of Ramadan starts 10 days earlier than the previous year. So in some years, Ramadan falls in the winter when the sun sets early, and in other years, Ramadan falls in the summer when the sun sets later. And it's harder to fast in those years, I'm sure. The fifth pillar of Islam is the Hajj, or pilgrimage to Mecca. Not all people are expected to keep this ritual. The goal is not to put people in debt or bankruptcy. The trip must be made during a certain time of the year, and the pilgrim must say certain prayers and keep certain rituals, such as walking around the Kaaba or the Black Stone in Mecca. Another unofficial pillar of Islam is jihad, or holy war. In the early days, this meant taking up arms against the enemies of the Islamic community. Muslims today, however, will say that jihad means to struggle against sinful desires. So that's all that a person needs to know to be a good Muslim. But Islam is not unified. There are some deep divisions within the religion. The largest division is between Sunni and Shia, and the best way to describe the division is to explain how it started. After Muhammad died, the leaders of the Ummah, the Muslim community, sat down together to decide who should be the successor to Muhammad. Some thought that Ali should be Muhammad's successor. Ali was Muhammad's cousin. He was the son of Muhammad's uncle, the man who protected Muhammad when he was growing up. And Ali married one of Muhammad's daughters, Fatima. Others, however, thought Ali at age 30 was too young to be the successor. And so Abu Bakr became the first caliph, or successor to Muhammad. Abu Bakr was Muhammad's father-in-law. He was one of several fathers-in-law since Muhammad had 14 wives. He had taken Abu Bakr's 6-year-old daughter Aisha as his wife. In 644, Omar was murdered, and Uthman was chosen as the new caliph. 12 years later, Uthman was murdered. This time, Ali was finally chosen as the caliph, the successor to his cousin Muhammad. But Ali's caliphate was disputed. War broke out. The war ended inconclusively, and as a result, Ali could not rule over the entire Muslim empire. Then in 661, Ali was murdered, and Muawiyah proceeded to rule over the entire Muslim empire. A few years later, in 680, Muawiyah died, and his son Yazid became the new caliph. Now, some Muslims still rallied around Ali's son Hussein. They were known as Hussein's partisans, or Hussein's Shia. They urged Hussein to revolt against Yazid, but he was killed outside the city of Karbala. Hussein's death came to be seen as a martyrdom. Some Muslim, the Shia, the partisans, came to see that Hussein had been betrayed by Muslims who had left the path of Muhammad. As time passed, some people believed that Muhammad passed along some secret information to Ali, who passed it along to his son Hussein. This secret knowledge was passed through a line of imams, or prayer leaders. The 12th imam in this line, so it is believed, went into occultation, or into hiding, and will one day return as the Mahdi and will restore justice to the world. Now, the Shia Muslims today make up about 10% of all Muslims. They're mostly concentrated in Iran and eastern Iraq. The cities of Kufa and Karbala, which are located in the present territory of Iraq, are visited by Shia pilgrims as a holy site. And the anniversary of the deaths of Ali and Hussein are honored by Shia Muslims who recreate their deaths and mourn on these holy days. So that's the difference between Sunni and Shia Islam. And there's, of course, much more that we could say about this, much more we could say about the religion of Islam. But hopefully this will serve as an introduction. Next time, we'll look at the end of the golden age of the Muslim empire.